Hello and welcome back to Politics on the Prairie. I'm your host, Dan Williams, and today we'll be going over the 2024 statewide performance for Kamala Harris and then looking at the 2020 to 2024 shift across the state of Oklahoma. So, like usual, we begin up here in the northwest region of the state, super red, as we've come to expect. Red is part of Oklahoma, absolutely. I'll be explaining some of the lighter red areas. As we can see, we have Clinton, Matonga, Enid up here, Ponca City. There's a light blue precinct right here is the town of Red Rock, which is the headquarters of the Oto-Missouri tribal nation. We've got Stillwater down here, Langston. Of course, we've got Tulsa, but we'll go into that a little later. Some of these pink areas up here are Bartlesville, Veneta, Claremore, Miami. Then we enter into the Riverlands portion of the state, where we can see blue dots in Bowley, Fort Coffee, Tahlequah, Muskogee, Taft, and Okmulgee. A lot of these more rural ones are the result of being black frontier towns, whereas the bluer, more urban areas are a result of some segregation, putting all the minority voters into one place. Here in the southeast, we can see this area has become a lot redder and now rivals the northwest in its partisan lean. So we can see that there's a blue precinct down here in Idabel and another blue precinct in Ardmore. We'll go down along the west here. One of the things I wanted to point out is we always see this super dark red portion kind of going from Grady County, western Garvin County, through Stevens down to Jefferson here. It's always noticeably redder than the counties on either side of it, which is always particularly interesting here. I think there's some oil and gas operations. We might explain that here. And then we see the Lawton area over here. And up here we have Anadarko, Norman, of course, right here. And then, Oklahoma City and Oklahoma County. So, zooming back out, we'll take a look at our insets real quick. Go into OKC. We can see very blue in the east side. That's come to be expected. It was a little bit redder this time in mid-double. We'll get into that, but lots of blue into the south side. Blue here in the west of downtown. Moving up into the Hefner corridor. UCO up in Edmond is blue. And we can see that blue precincts are slowly coming out of downtown area, starting to touch the edges of the county up in the Canadian County region, starting to touch Cleveland County. So definitely expanding that way. Looking at Tulsa, we can see that we have North Tulsa here, super Democratic. Less Democratic here in downtown. Increasingly, large swaths of Democratic precincts going out along the river, going towards east side Tulsa, coming through the middle of town, going towards Broken Arrow. And then we'll cap off with Lawton. Lawton tends to have a southern precincts tend to be bluer, larger black population down here in the south, but there are a scattering of like pink precincts among some darker precincts as well. So this is, even though there's much more red here than there is blue, this is actually a pretty close result given how pink most of these precincts are. So now we're going to go to the shift map. Here we have the 2020 to 2024 presidential shift. Oklahoma shifted the second least right out of any state in the country. And no, that's not just because of our partisan lean starting off with. Many states in our partisan cohort shifted much further to the right. But let's get into it. So one of the things we saw in 2024 was a lot of shifts left in these northwestern areas and a lot of these rural areas, right? And while I think there is something to be said about actual shift among these hyper-Republican communities, a large portion of these lighter swings is just Republicans either moving out or passing away. Given that this area has a super Republican bent, people that leave or die are more likely to be Republican, so that's reflecting all of these lighter swings. However, I do think there's an ever increasing defection going on in a lot of these areas that are swinging them slightly to Democrats. Now, granted, these are very rural areas, so even double-digit swings wouldn't change the statewide total that much. But it is important to see what areas are coming towards you and what areas are going away, right? And we can see that there's one thing also to note. This isn't one-to-one as the precinct boundaries have changed since 2020, going into 2024. But certainly something we need to be aware of and try to track. We can see that most of the rural areas, rural metros, Ponca City, Enid, shifted left a bunch. There is some interesting rightward shifts around the Guthrie area. A lot of new movers in this area, very ex-urban in character. So a lot of people who kind of want to live in medium density, but definitely want to live away from the city. So very intentional movements around here, right? And if we go into Stillwater, we can see that parts of the city shifted left, but on the campus, it shifted rightward. A lot of that can be explained due to relative turnout drops, right? So we move up here into the northeast part of the state, we can see some, definitely some blue shifts here. We're getting into Tulsa into a little bit, but communities like Owasso shifted a little bit to the left. Bartlesville, Veneta, right? Going down here to what I like to call the Riverlands, we can see that there are a lot of still red shifts, a lot of ancestral Democrats here. Still, shifting red, absolutely, but there are some blue shifts here around the Muskogee area, Tahlequah, Okmulgee. And even in the southeast portion of the state that it's getting redder, we can see that there's still some blue going on here. Granted, again, a lot of these areas are super rural, so double-digit swings aren't going to change the statewide total much, but it is interesting to note nonetheless. As we go through the south part of the state, we can see that there are pretty light shifts either way, so not any huge shifts. That super red area I pointed out last time, going from Grady, Stevens, Jefferson, there actually was some blue shifts here. A little bit of shifting towards Kamala Harris. Very interesting in that regard. And then a bit of a mixed bag as we get into southwest Oklahoma. Take a look at Norman real quick here. In Norman, we see Norman and Cleveland County, we see a couple things going on, right? So turnout dropped around core Norman, right? Ward 4, Ward 7, right? Traditionally super Democratic areas. So Harris actually ended up doing a little bit worse than Biden. But in these outer areas of Norman, your Brookhavens, your east of 24th, even out here in the areas getting affected by the turnpike, you do see leftward shifts, which are particularly interesting, right? And then you go into North Cleveland County, and you can see a lot of shifts in the Moore area and the southern OKC area towards Democrats as well. We're going to look at our insets real quick here. I actually don't really need the insets particularly since I figured out how to fix the line boundaries, but we're still going to use them for ease of access. But here we are in Oklahoma County and then a little bit of the surrounding area. You can see that the eastern Canadian County portion has gotten a lot bluer. This is going to be the Yukon, Mustang, even up the Piedmont area. There are some there are some red shifts here, but a lot of this area is growing and it's getting blue and it's starting to counteract, the net votes, so to speak, going on over there. Area growing via population and it producing net votes for Republicans. We get here into Oklahoma County, we do see some pretty interesting red shifts going on here, as well as some pretty dark blue shifts as well. So we'll start with the red. South side, east side had the most apparent red shifts. Now, there's been a lot of to-do made out of Hispanics shifting right, and I think, certainly in the last cycle that didn't really happen in Oklahoma. There's been some of that this cycle. The GOP opened up a Hispanic outreach center down in Oklahoma County for a bit, so that might have had an impact. But a lot of this is turnout related. We saw a lot of asymmetric turnout drop-offs among Democrats for various reasons. So that's definitely driving that some of that here. There's also a little bit of depopulation going on. Northern south side is being gentrified. It's becoming wider and pushing the Hispanic population further south. And then the east side is becoming less black as those folks move out into the Putnam City and other parts of the Oklahoma County area, right? The other factor here, we've seen a lot of education realignment, and certainly that continues to be a factor in Oklahoma politics, as we can see here in the Hefner corridor, Northwest Expressway, Highway 74, that this area is becoming much more Democratic indeed. Senate District 47, which shifted, several points to the left this time. Still won by Trump, but went from double digits Trump to low single digits Trump this time around. And then Edmond, right up here, went from being won by Romney by about 50 points in 2012 to now it's only been won by Trump by plus 20. Up in these areas, certainly a lot of it. High education here. There's a lot of higher income folks here experiencing, very large shifts as well. There's also been a lot of precinct organization in this area from Democrats, and you can definitely see that some of the precincts with more exaggerated swings towards Democrats are organized. Moving to the Tulsa area, and we see somewhat a similar thing that we saw in the Oklahoma City area. Predominantly black communities and Hispanic communities, so North Tulsa, then sliding around into Eastern Tulsa, had a shift right. But here in the, Tulsa diagonal, as I like to call it, very educated, much wider, much wealthier, going from the oil mansions just south of downtown all the way down to almost the Bixby area. We see a big dramatic shift left here. This, overall, Tulsa County shifted left, right? And mind you, put this in context, the entire country shifted almost 6 points to the right. So this is, doubly impressive considering this is, if you look at trend, this is a huge, huge, a buck of the nationwide trend, right? And then we'll end with the Lawton area. Here in Lawton, we saw some red shifts among majority black precincts and some light blue shifts across the city. Nothing too dramatic. I mean, we got these darker colors up here, but there's not a lot of votes being cast. There's a military base up here. So Lawton kind of stayed the same this time around. Definitely some interesting things going on under the hood in the state of Oklahoma. While the overall top line result seems to stay the same, election to election, definitely the internal coalitions are changing. So we'll just try to keep aware of that as we continue on in this series. But thank you very much for tuning in today. I've been your host, Dan Williams, and we'll be back soon with some more 2024 breakdowns and some of the local elections we just had here in the month of February of 2025. So thank you for tuning in, and I'll catch you next time. Bye.